welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really plunging into, well, a fascinating and honestly often surprising story. Apple's deep relationship with China. Our main guide for this is Patrick McGee's excellent book, Apple in China, The Capture of the World's Greatest Company.
Yeah, it's a great source.
So our mission here is to kind of pull out the most important bits of knowledge, the key insights from this, really helping you understand how Apple, this iconic American company, got so tightly linked with an authoritarian state.
Right. And it's not just about manufacturing costs, is it? It's about these huge, complex benefits, but also vulnerabilities on both sides.
Exactly. And how these fundamental decisions about where to build things actually shaped Apple's whole identity and sort of unintentionally helped China become this global tech giant.
It's a huge story. Lots of unintended consequences.
Definitely. So get ready for some surprising facts, maybe a few aha moments, because this really does go way deeper than just, supply chains.
It really does. It's kind of a story about how chasing what seems like pure corporate efficiency can trigger these massive geopolitical shifts with really long-term effects.
That's a perfect starting point. So let's begin right at the beginning. Apple's big shift, right?
Yeah.
From controlling everything in-house to strategic outsourcing.
Yeah. Think back to the origins. Steve Wozniak's Apple II, that really set the standard for the first personal computer.
And then, of course, Steve Jobs, that dramatic unveiling of the Macintosh back in 1984. I mean, the computer talked.
Hello, I'm Macintosh.
Yeah, it was incredible. Really signaled Apple's vision, like we control our destiny, we build our own stuff.
It did, but not long after that, they hit a major wall, IBM.
IBM.
In '81, IBM jumps into the PC market, but not with amazing new tech. Their genius move was open architecture.
Explain that a bit. What did open architecture really mean in practice?
Well, basically, they designed it so other companies could easily license their operating system, MS-DOS at the time, and build compatible hardware. Clones, basically. It just opened the floodgates.
And Jobs.
Yeah.
How did he react? Didn't he kind of dismiss them?
Oh, totally. Famously called the IBM PC junk. He even took out those full-page ads, welcome IBM, seriously.
Yeah, I remember that. Was that just bravado, or did he genuinely miss something big there, like a real blind spot?
I think maybe a bit of both. Overconfidence, for sure. Maybe a blind spot, too.
Right.
The consequences came fast. IBM had zero PC revenue in 1980. By 82, 16% of the market, they were outselling Apple 2-to-1.
Wow. 2-to-1 in just 2 years.
And by 84, IBM's TC sales hit over $6 billion. That was nearly triple Apple's. So even though IBM's own PC division eventually faded, that open model, it set the standard and really put Apple on the back foot.
And that misstep, that challenge, it really brought Apple down, didn't it? By the mid-90s, the company was in serious trouble. The famous Fall of an American Icon cover on Business Week.
Yeah, that period was rough. There's that story about Guerino De Luca, an Apple exec.
Oh, yeah. Tell that one.
He was trying to buy a house, put in an offer. The owner subscribed to Business Week, saw De Luca worked for Apple, got spooked by that cover, and pulled the deal.
No way. That really shows how bad the perception was.
It absolutely does. And it led to this critical moment, this capitulation, as McGee calls it. They sold Apple's big fountain factory to a company called SCI Spacecraft Inc., a contract manufacturer. Interestingly, they had roots in complex U.S. government projects.
Not just some random factory.
No, and their CEO, Alan B. King, he basically pioneered the whole electronics manufacturing services industry, which is now worth, what, $500 billion?
$500 billion. Wow. So that sale, it wasn't just unloading a factory. It was a huge strategic pivot.
Massive. It marked Apple's new direction. They slashed 4,200 jobs, downsized everywhere. They basically gave up that control your own destiny through manufacturing idea.
But what happened right after? What was the immediate effect of, letting go?
Well, it really kicked off what McGee calls the Asian awakening in manufacturing. Suddenly, you had Japanese companies like Sony making the PowerBook 100.
And the quality was?
Apparently, it just blew away Apple's internal teams. It sparked this huge debate inside Apple, a big fucking debate about letting outsiders into its roadmap at the CPU level.
Yeah.
That was a big deal for them.
A real crisis of confidence, maybe.
Right.
And then the Taiwanese manufacturers came in.
Yeah, companies like Inventec. They showed this unusual initiative. For Apple's Newton, remember the Newton?
Vaguely. Ahead of its time, maybe.
Maybe. Anyway, Inventec invested over $800,000 of their own money just for the Newton design. They bought expensive equipment they didn't even have.
That's That's real commitment, more than just taking an order.
Absolutely. It's taking a huge risk. And Robert Brunner, who is Apple's industrial design director back then, he said something pretty striking.
What was that?
He said, Apple is single-handedly responsible for bringing quality into Southeast Asia.
Wow. So the idea is Apple's super intense demands pushing these suppliers.
Yeah.
It didn't just make good Apple products, it actually leveled up the whole region's manufacturing game.
That's the argument. Apple demanded perfection, nothing less. And eventually they got it, which kind of set the stage for the next chapter.
Right. So Apple's down, they've outsourced manufacturing, but then comes the comeback. Steve Jobs returns, and this impossible design challenge, the iMac.
And along with it, the rise of this manufacturing giant, Foxconn. Yeah, Jobs comes back in '97, finds Jony Ive, the future design guru.
Who was feeling?
According to the book, the most frustrated person I'd ever met, because his beautiful, elegant designs were constantly being shot down by engineers saying, nope, can't build it.
And I've had this iMac prototype.
Yeah, this stunning, really curvaceous thing looked like it was from outer space, but it had this fundamental flaw.
The shape, right, the undercut.
Exactly, this eggshell shape that literally could not be built, not even in the lab, let alone mass production. An engineering nightmare.
And Jobs being Jobs?
Uh-huh.
How did he handle that?
Oh, classic Jobs. He confronts the engineer, David Hillman, just blows up, apparently shouting, that's so fucking stupid about the design.
Yikes.
But here's the brilliant part. Hillman, quick as a flash, just agrees. I agree with you. It is really stupid. And that diffused it. They scrapped the design and rethought it.
Smart move by Hillman. And I've apparently also acted as a sort of Steve Handler protecting his team.
Yeah, seems like he had to manage Jobs' intensity quite a bit. But that whole engineering hurdle, it led them to LG in South Korea.
Ah, the LG partnership.
Yeah.
And the Man-on-Mirror program.
Right. Apple literally embedded engineers like this guy, Chris Novak, in LG's factory in Gumi, 204/7, managing every single tiny detail.
Those have been tough conditions.
Sounds like it. They stayed in this hotel described as a pigsty. Tim Cook himself apparently stayed standing up all night once because the room was so bad.
Tim Cook, standing all night.
That's
dedication.
cooking.
Or desperation, maybe.
A bit of both, probably. And the factory. Cramped. No high-quality manufacturing processes or systems or automation at all. It was all bodies on a line. Really basic stuff at first.
Incredible. And those first iMacs that Jobs showed off on stage.
Get this. They were actually handcrafted prototypes flown in from Korea. That's how tight the timelines were, how much pressure they were under.
Wow. But that success, getting the iMac out, it really cemented Apple's new strategy, didn't it? Manage the outsourcers, don't build it yourself.
Absolutely. They gutted their own factories, Singapore, Sacramento, Ireland. The focus shifted entirely to managing partners.
And this is where Tim Cook really comes into his own, the Terminator machine.
Yeah. Jobs' new operations weren't his strength. He lured Cook away from IBM. Cook was seen as sensible, meticulously organized, the polar opposite of Jobs in some ways, but exactly what Apple needed.
So his control over the supply chain was legendary. But what was the core of his approach? How did that pressure cooker environment he created, how did that help a company like Foxconn rise?
Well, Cook's approach was just incredibly granular, demanding. Those weekly review meetings, sometimes they went on for 13 hours.
13 hours.
Yeah. And that famous and 50 story.
Tell me that one again.
If a manager reported, say, shipping 200,000 50 units one week, Cook would remember. The next week, if they just said 200,000, he'd deadpan. And 50, just demanding absolute precision.
Wow. Okay. And the if story.
If a manager said something like, if we can charter a 747, the problem's solved, Cook would just icily reply, if, implying, don't tell me if, just do it. Followed by silence, apparently very effective.
So intense. And his philosophy for suppliers?
Basically, don't ever be afraid to be unreasonable. He told his team to ask for the moon. He figured suppliers would just say no if they really couldn't do it.
Right. That aggressive, super detailed approach.
Yeah.
How did that mesh with Foxconn and its founder, Terry Gou? He had this huge ambition, right? Like Genghis Khan.
Yeah, Gou was incredibly ambitious and visionary. There's that Field of Dreams story.
Where he points to an empty lot.
Exactly. Points to this empty lot filled with garbage and tells Apple, here's your factory for the iPod Nano. He just willed it into existence. He saw Apple's super complex designs not just as a job, but as this massive learning opportunity.
So it wasn't just about the money for Foxconn initially. It was about soaking up knowledge.
That seems to be the key. McGee quotes someone saying, his people used to hate us because they used to make no money out of us. But the real payoff was the learning, the deep education from having Apple engineers embedded, teaching them everything.
Right. So Apple is basically training its future giant supplier.
Inadvertently, yeah.
Yeah.
And Foxconn's efficiency was legendary. That military style, work hard on the job today or work hard to find a job tomorrow. They could scale like nobody else, all honed by Apple's relentless demands.
And the scale of Apple's investment, get this, by 2015, Apple was putting $55 billion annually into China. That dwarfed the entire U.S. CHIPS Act, which was $52 billion over 4 years.
Whoa, that puts it in perspective.
Right. So it really makes you ask, what happens to, like, national economies when one single company invests that heavily in another country's industry? It completely changes the game.
It absolutely does. And that massive investment, that whole learning environment Apple created, it really shaped the future. Which brings us to the iPhone era and some pretty big unintended consequences, and Apple's starting to wake up politically.
Okay, yeah. The iPhone, but first, the iPod rush really set the tone for these negotiations, right? Very aggressive. Enter Tony Blevins.
Ah, Blevins. Described by some as a shark, even a sociopath.
Strong words. There's that story about him with Inventec and the iPod contracts.
Yeah, basically demanding they sign contracts on the spot without even reading them, threatening to just walk away and give the business to someone else if they hesitated. Pure hardball.
And that approach had consequences, didn't it? Inventec tried something sneaky.
They did. They apparently tried selling some iPods out the back door, basically on the green market. Apple found out, and boom, business shifted heavily to Foxconn.
And Foxconn was ready, offering to help with development for almost nothing.
For pennies on the dollar, yeah. Just to grow with Apple, they played the long game.
But the result for Foxconn's bottom line, short term.
It tanked their margins. They went from like 10.6% in 2000 down to just 2.4% by 2011, even though their revenues were soaring. Apple's tough negotiations and those no-quibble warranties really squeezed them.
That quote really sums it up. You use an iPod occasionally, but you use the iPhone all the fucking time. The warranty costs must have exploded with the iPhone.
Exactly. Which leads us to the iPhone's birth, Project Purple.
Oh.
Super secretive, super demanding.
The multi-touch tech demo filled a whole room, right?
Yeah.
And Jobs wanted that full screen, no keyboard. Seemed crazy back then.
Totally. And the lengths they went to for secrecy and quality. Engineers shipping huge VCR-sized radio frequency testing machines in their personal luggage to China.
In their luggage.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yep. To keep it secret. And get this. 2/3 of the entire iPhone production line was just for testing and validation. 2/3. That was unheard of. Nokia might have had one test station. Apple had 50.
50 test stations for every line. The cost must have been insane. How did they find suppliers willing to meet these crazy demands?
It took some real characters, like Zhu Quanfei of Lens Technology, high school dropout, becomes a glass genius, and so connected that when the power went out, she somehow got fire trucks to bring generators to keep her factory running for Apple.
Wow, resourceful. And Michael Cham.
TPK touchscreens, described as a classic Taiwanese cowboy. Bold, unconventional, just built factories out of nowhere, turning fields into high-tech plants practically overnight. These were the kind of agile, risk-taking partners Apple needed.
And then the launch, 2007. Pure chaos.
Utter frenzy. Executives felt like they might get mugged just using prototypes in public. McGee calls it an animalistic lust for the device. Which brings us to the yellow cows in China.
Right, the scalpers, what were they about?
Huang New yellow cows. Just like the old train ticket scalpers, but for iPhones. And they weren't just random guys, they were incredibly sophisticated operations.
How sophisticated.
Paying fleets of bag ladies 100 yuan each just to stand in line. Carrying Louis Vuitton bags literally stuffed with cash 100 yuan notes to buy up phones. They even hacked Apple's online reservation system.
That's wild. And it led to actual trouble, right? The bloody Apple brawl.
Yeah, May 2011. Sanlitun store in Beijing. Big confrontation. An Apple employee named John Ford got arrested.
And Jobs saw the video.
And exploded. Furious. Demanded Ford be fired immediately using some pretty strong language.
But Ford's response was interesting.
It was. He basically said to Jobs, I agree with you, it is really fucking stupid. But he wasn't talking about his own actions. He meant Apple's lack of stores, the terrible distribution in China that created the whole scalping problem.
Okay, that makes sense. And for ordinary Chinese people, the iPhone was more than just a phone, wasn't it?
Huge status symbol. One source compared it to being one of the first people with a car instead of riding a horse. It just screamed, modernity, status. That fueled the frenzy.
But all this chaos, the scalpers, the brawl, it highlighted Apple's vulnerability, didn't it? especially as Xi Jinping was rising.
Definitely. Then came the 2013 incident with CCTV, the state broadcaster, alleging differences in warranty policies for Chinese customers. It really exposed how deeply exposed Apple was and how they lacked a real government strategy in China.
Plus the counterfeit problem. Fake iPhones, entire fake Apple stores that even employees couldn't tell weren't real.
Yeah, it was messy. And Xi Jinping's rise in 2012 really changed the landscape. China wasn't just a multinational haven anymore. The message became, prioritize indigenous innovation. Companies need to give back.
And Beijing had a specific issue with how Apple was set up.
Yeah, Apple was officially registered as just a trading company, which in Beijing apparently sounded practically offensive. It echoed colonial exploitation, China's century of humiliation. Plus, unlike rivals, Apple had no R&D centers in China, no real local partnerships. It looked like they were just taking, not investing back.
A lack of commitment in their eyes.
Exactly. So Apple had to change tack. They formed this internal group, the Gang of Eight.
Including Doug Guthrie, the China whisperer.
Right. This dyslexic academic who learned perfect Mandarin really understood China's complex system, regionally decentralized authoritarian regime, he called it. Federalism on steroids.
So nuanced that the FBI apparently wondered if he was a Chinese asset.
Yeah. Their mission was basically to find Apple's story in China, to figure out how to navigate this new political reality. It was a real wake-up call.
The shift from just pure operations to geopolitics.
Absolutely. Which led to this idea that in China, voluntary is the new mandatory, like with corporate social responsibility, CSR. Well, Beijing's approach was very top-down. Apple got ranked surprisingly low on environmental issues by a Chinese NGO. That wasn't just about pollution. It was read as a signal from Beijing. Engage more, transfer technology, don't just focus on green initiatives. They were being guided firmly.
A subtle pressure play. And this all ties into Apple's biggest unintended legacy, right? Helping create the red supply chain.
Exactly. That whole advanced Chinese electronics manufacturing ecosystem, because Apple's super high standard, the embedded engineers teaching everything, it essentially gave birth to the Chinese smartphone industry.
So the skills Apple taught its suppliers.
They didn't just stay with Apple products. Those suppliers turned around and applied that knowledge, the processes, the quality control, everything to build phones for homegrown Chinese brands. Huawei, Xiaomi, Vivo, Oppo.
As one supplier said, working with Apple is really fucking hard. We learned so much. It was like the world's toughest, most effective manufacturing school.
Pretty much. And the results. By 2014, Chinese brands had grabbed 74% of their own huge smartphone market.
Which leads to that really provocative line. The iPhone didn't kill Nokia. Chinese imitators of the iPhone did.
It's a powerful point, and this red supply chain got bold. They started poaching talent aggressively from Apple's suppliers.
Brazenly, right? Like, tell us everything you know.
Yeah. There's that anecdote about a Foxconn exec seeing a top engineer leave for Huawei and just asking, completely bewildered, who the fuck is Huawei?
They learned soon enough. Huawei really came back strong.
Oh, yeah. They started making phones that really rivaled the iPhone X in quality features. It caused a disaster for Apple's iPhone XR sales in China in 2018.
Cook blamed the cooling Chinese economy publicly.
But internally, yeah, they knew. It was Huawei. The student had truly become the master. Huawei actually surpassed Apple in global sales by 2019.
Wow, they actually overtook them.
They did. But then the twist. Trump hits Huawei with sanctions in 2019. Security threats cited. It crippled Huawei's business outside China.
And inadvertently,
it basically saved Apple, gave them breathing room right when the competition was getting fiercest. A total geopolitical intervention changing the market.
A really fascinating twist. But then came an even bigger shock. COVID-19.
Yeah, that really forced the issue of diversification. That story of the Apple engineer escaping Wuhan during lockdown, multiple taxis, dodging checkpoints. It paints a picture of total chaos and dependence.
And the quarantine for engineers going into China.
Sounded grim. Dicey as hell. Bare hotel rooms, getting goodie bags with lint rollers because the sheets were dirty, daily nasal swabs. It really brought home the fragility.
And then the Shanghai lockdown in 2022, the huge worker protests in Zhengzhou, described as the biggest challenge to Communist Party rules since Tiananmen. That was the final straw, wasn't it?
Seems like it. China went overnight from Apple's reliable production base to being seen as completely unreliable.
Which finally pushed them hard towards Plan B India.
Right. They'd been slowly moving some production AirPods, Apple Watch, iPads out of China already. But the big push for iPhone production in India really accelerated after the lockdowns and also due to tariffs.
But it's not that simple, is it? The scale is totally different.
Not even close. India's making maybe 7% of global iPhones now. That's about 15 million units by 2023. Compare that to China ramping up to 153 million a decade earlier. It's a huge gap.
And made in India doesn't always mean what you think.
Often no. It means parts made and assembled in China, disassembled, shipped to India, and then reassembled there just to meet local requirements or avoid tariffs.
So true new product introduction. Designing and launching a brand new product from scratch in India that's still way off.
Yeah, the estimate is 5 to 10 years, if it's even fully achievable. There are huge infrastructure and skill gaps still.
And Foxconn isn't exactly thrilled about shifting massive investment out of China.
They have limited interest, according to McGee. Their whole empire is built in China. But Apple is basically saying, if you want to keep making iPhones, you will expand in India. It's a real power play, forcing their hand.
A very complex dance. And that brings us to the final, maybe biggest vulnerability, TSMC.
Ah, yes. Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing company, the linchpin.
Apple's decision in 2020 to move all its Mac chips, the Apple Silicon, to TSMC. That concentrated manufacturing power, didn't it?
Hugely. Something like 80% of the world's most advanced chips are now made by TSMC, mostly on that one small island, Taiwan.
Which is geopolitically sensitive, to say the least.
Extremely. War game simulations consistently predict TSMC's fabs wouldn't survive a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. The estimated global economic hit, between $600 billion and $1 trillion annually.
$1 trillion a year, that's staggering.
It is. Morris Chang, TSMC's legendary founder, he calls efforts to build cutting-edge fabs elsewhere, like in the US or Europe, a very expensive exercise in futility. The ecosystem is just too concentrated, too specialized in Taiwan.
So TSMC is basically uniquely critical.
McGee puts it starkly. TSMC is the only corporation in history that could cause a global depression if it were forced to halt production. That's the kind of vulnerability that has to keep Tim Cook awake at night.
No kidding. Okay, so wrapping this up, what does this all really mean? This whole deep dive shows Apple's journey, right? An American icon to global giant is just completely tied up with this deep, complex, often really difficult relationship with China.
Absolutely. It started as this relentless chase for efficiency, for scale, but it had these profound, often unintended consequences, not just for Apple, but for China's own rise as a tech power.
It's such a stark reminder, isn't it, that balance or maybe tension between what's good for a corporation and what's in a nation's interest, and how one can just massively shape the other.
Which really makes you ask, Apple, the company that told us to think different, to break the mold, has become so incredibly reliant on this one authoritarian state. What does that signal about, the future of global innovation or even corporate identity?
Yeah. And consider this final thought from McGee. It's pretty provocative. He argues China wouldn't be China today without Apple, and that Apple DNA is everywhere in China's advanced electronics sector.
Wow, that's a big claim.
It is. So how does Apple's current role in China, seemingly indispensable but loaded with all this geopolitical risk, how does that reshape its legacy? And maybe even how we understand global capitalism itself? Lots to think about there.